It's yours.
Good afternoon, it's 4:10, I'm Board Secretary Amy Oakley calling this special meeting of the RFA Planning Committees for the Shoreline Fire Department and the North Shore Fire Department. Our first item is Pledge Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item is roll call. Commissioner Callahan,
Here.
Commissioner Heflin,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Byers,
Present.
Commissioner Webster,
Here.
Commissioner Pratt is on his way, he'll arrive shortly. Chief Cowan,
Here.
Legal Counsel Brian Snur,
Here.
and I'm North Shore Board Secretary Amy Oakley. Our next item is public comment. If there's anyone online who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand and unmute yourself. Let's make her so. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move into the first and only agenda item, which is the initial planning meeting for establishing an RFA between Shoreline and North Shore Fire Departments.
Thanks, Amy. So thanks for, finally getting all of our schedules together. At the end of the meeting today, I think it behoove us to align our schedules for the next, coming meetings as well. I'd like to, this is a new process for me. I've been kind of on the peripheral of a few of these, looking in. But we were pretty blessed to be able to have Brian Stern here today to at least have us start through the process. One of the things I would like to look at today would be to continue using Brian and or Matt Paxton. They are aligned in the same, or I'm sorry, they have not a remote interest, but they
I'm of council to see us.
Thanks.
Not the second part of this, but.
So this is a new process for all of us, and so it would be nice to have somebody who's a professional and expert at this to be able to walk us through it all. So hopefully that's something that that both boards can get behind as well. I know that both Tyler and Ricky, Matt Paxton addressed us at the North Shore Board about the potential conflict of interest because Matt represents North Shore and Brian is he represents Shoreline in a lot of manners. He felt that it wasn't a problem, but that's something to make sure that everybody still feels comfortable with as well. So I asked Brian to walk us through not only a presentation kind of on, or actually he has a presentation. I asked him to walk us through the process and all that. He has a PowerPoint presentation, which I can get it up and running. And then do the next steps and all that. And Josh will have to catch up. So let's see.
You already wrote them up there.
If you'd like, I can or it will work in there if you want to stay there too.
Okay.
So I'm going to share screen.
You put it in.
Oh, yeah, so, where is it? No, that's not it. Maybe the other editing. Okay.
Good one.
There. It doesn't, I'll come back, that's one.
All right, well, thanks for having me. I guess one just business item, the statute on planning committees does state that at your first initial meeting, you may select officers, so a chair. That's probably something when your other member gets here, you might want to do today, just so you have some structure. Beyond that, I think today, my understanding is this is more of an educational meeting. You're not gonna start drafting your plan today, but you're gonna kind of learn what the process is gonna look like, what issues you need to think about, and all of those types of things. So you should all have a copy of an RFA plan template. And I provided it to Chief Cowan a couple months ago. It's just once again, an educational tool. This is the format that I've used for the various fire authorities that I've worked on forming. It's most RFA plans format wise are fairly consistent around the state. There's only a few attorneys that do them, and we all steal from each other. So there's not a lot of unique components. The unique part is in the substance of your plan, particularly the government sector. So what I thought I would do today, I put together just a short PowerPoint to which kind of follows along the plan template, and I'll, this is your meeting, so if you have questions, ask them, interrupt me. Really, the PowerPoint is guided or designed more just to be an agenda with pictures and words.
Which is announced, Josh.
All right.
Commissioner Josh Pratt is joining me.
Thank you.
So with that, it's you've gotten to the point of forming a planning committee, so you have a general idea and understanding of what a regional fire authority is. And really what it is a when it's two fire districts, it makes the whole discussion much easier. If we had the city of Bothell sitting here, or the city of Woodville, or any other city that wasn't within your fire districts already, it gets a lot more complicated, because in that situation, you're carving a division of a city out of the city, and the city remains with all of its assets and finances. So it gets a lot more complicated. The nice thing about the two fire district RFA, what it really is it's contractual consolidation that you ask the voters to vote on. It creates a brand new entity, a new municipal corporation, and you're basically starting from scratch day one. So you've got the two fire districts that become a regional fire authority. The voters approve it, and they're voting on a plan that this committee is tasked with creating. When they approve that, if they approve that, you have a brand new legal entity. The two fire districts still exist. Fire districts can continue to exist for as long as you need them or want them to exist. They really don't have anything to do once the RFA is formed. There can be, if you have commissioners appointed by each fire district, which we'll talk about, then the fire districts have to continue to exist. If you sometimes there can be some outstanding debt that a fire district will continue to monitor, but generally speaking, there are not really any RFAs that exist where the fire districts continue, except for those where the fire districts are appointing them. There's nothing for fire districts to do, and why have three governmental entities provide fire service if you can get it down to one? The idea of doing this is really efficiencies, all of those types of things. So that's just kind of the big picture. Municipal corporation RFA is virtually identical to a fire district. There's a couple significant differences. Important ones we'll talk about today. But once it's formed, it's municipal corporation, special purpose district, provides fire protection, fire suppression, EMS, non-emergency care programs, all that kind of stuff. And it's well defined. All that's in 5226 RCW. So that's kind of the big picture. This is the procedure we're going to follow to form your RFA. That's the Afghanistan stability dynamics, which explains a few things. So process wise, it's a pretty simple process when you boil it down. You form a planning committee, 3 members from each participating jurisdiction, and here you are. Your task then is design the RFA plan. That's where the work comes in. That's going to address how your new government that you're creating is going to operate, for governance, funding, assets, liabilities, what services you're going to provide, all those things. And that's what we're going to spend most time kind of walking through today at a general level. And then, as you know, forming a planning committee, these are public meetings. The statute specifically requires that you engage the public and get public input. That doesn't have to be a public comment session at every meeting, but you could have schedule some public meetings, those kinds of things where you actually actively invite people in to get into as your form plan. That would probably come down the road just a bit. So This committee works, you come up with a plan that you think makes sense. It then goes back to each of you separately as governing bodies, so North Shore and Shoreline boards would both have to approve the plan and you would jointly call for an election. The election occurs, it's a simple majority, unless you have certain financing tools, then it's a super majority of everybody within both jurisdictions. So it's not an approval in Shoreline and an approval in North Shore, it's an approval of all voters combined. And then the other nice thing about forming an RFA is you don't have to deal with boundary people. You do annexations and versus. Not that that's a difficult hurdle, it just takes time and then you go through that process, and that is not required in this one. It's required. So process wise, that's it. You form this committee, you create a plan, give it to the voters, voters approve it. And you're up and running. You don't need me.
Should be done next week.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's done right now, it's sitting in front of you, already recording. So one, just consideration procedurizes the effective date of the regional fire, it makes a big difference. It used to be that it would become effective the June 1st or January 1st after the vote. That proved to be unworkable in a lot of areas, so the law was modified a few years ago, and now you can select your own effective date. And the key date there to remember is October 1st, no matter what election you're at. Except for the general, if there's after October 1st, you can set your effective date to any date you want. If you set it, so if you have your election next April, or you have your election next February, April, or August of next year, as long as you say this is going to be effective by September 30th, then the RFA can levy taxes, benefit charges, whatever the line authorizes in the year that you're formed for election the following year. If you ran it in a general election, or if you ran in the primary and said it's going to be effective January 1st, then the two fire districts would, you would form it and say it's next year. You form it in the general election in 2025. The RFA wouldn't be able to levy taxes or benefit charges until 2026 for election. So, whereas if you ran it in the primary and it was formed on September 30th, then you could levy taxes in 25 for election in 26. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's, you know, you both levy taxes, every benefit charges and revenues are coming in, so it's not as critical as it would be once again if you had a city involved.
Just to clarify, August the April or August elections are fine. Right, it's just, you can't be in the general election.
Yeah, it's just if you're in the general election, then you're not going to be collecting revenues for it.
Because I've seen a couple different dates, and I think one said that if it was in any later than the April election, then you're still not collecting in that fall.
So that would have been the way it used to be, because the April election would have. Yeah,
But
the
the
August
August election,
the August election would have made the effective date January 1st, but now you can select it. So the last couple I've been involved with, they ran them in the primary. It takes a while to create a new entity. That means you have to get your tax ID numbers, you have to re-register all state agencies, Department of Justice systems. Your first meeting as an RFA, you have a boatload of resolutions to take care of all those things. But you know, the administrative, the payroll folks have the most work to do because they've got to get everything set up and go. So the last couple I've had, they made the effective date September 30th. That gives us at least 2 months to try to get things organized. And then Kittitas County one, we're going to become effective on September 30th, so they can levy their taxes. That was last year. But they're not going to start operating as an RFA until January 1st. So you can make those kind of distinctions here. Yeah, that's just part of the plan. It's going to discuss when do we want to be effective for taxation and revenue purposes. When are we going to be ready to go operational? Yeah, that just needs to be laid out.
And that was kind of the question I had. You know, I'm pretty clear on where the revenues, you know, that would fall into January 1 of next year. But if we had formed the RFA, and let's say in April, the April election, we could consolidate everything, you know, whenever we're ready.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. It's just the revenues piece that would have to wait till January.
Yeah, I think like Rent RFA, I think they had the April election and they formed, I think it was July 1st. Yeah, and they weren't gonna, you know, they had the plan to address revenues until they started collecting the following year, which is the same thing you would do. Your operational date can be whenever you want.
Okay.
So, once again, that's the process, you planning committee, create a plan, send it to the voters, voters approve, and effective date, and away you go. So, in all of that simple process, there's one big project, and that is the RFA plan, and that's, you've got the kind of template there. As I said, it's a pretty common template, nothing magic about it. If you want to do a different format of the template, you're the planning committee, you can do whatever you like. But this is kind of a logical way to go through it. You see it's broken down. Background is need statement, that's gonna come from this planning committee in both of the districts, what's your history together, why are you doing this? It's the part of the plan, to the extent voters read the plan, that they're gonna look at it and say, oh, okay, this is why you're doing it. And unlike your explanatory statement, which will be limited to 200 words, your background and needs statement can really outline why you think this is a good idea. That's the 2 bullets. So you get to the point you think it's a good idea. And so that will be drafted by you. There's not a lot of legalese in it. A definitions section, pretty straightforward what that is. I think the key parts of that are it's going to define who's forming the plan, who's forming the RFA, shoreline, what your effective date is. And then, of course, the big issue, the one that has brought RFA down to that, what's the name? Right? That's a sensitive subject, and it's a public issue too, so that's something this community gets to wrestle with. That's where it can be found. Formation authority is the provision that's in the template plan there is going to be pretty similar probably to what you end up approving. It's just outlining you had a planning community that you met, you had public input, and you have the authority to create this. As we go on, the second schedule of March, the jurisdictional boundaries. I've actually got slides on most of these, let me just jump forward. But these are the basic components of the plan. You can have more if there's some specific issue that needs to be addressed that I haven't thought about that comes to the planning committee. You can have additional sections. You can break these down into more detail. You can do whatever you like. Big picture with your plan, every part of the plan you get to decide how it can be amended going forward. And the very first RFA plan state was Valley Regional Fire Authority, which is Auburn, Pacific, and Algona. And name some of you may recognize Stonebridge County guy, Bob Merritt, was a consultant to help put that together, and city attorneys put it together. They did it 6 months after the statute was drafted because they were desperate to get the same form. And they, as we often do, this is America, we get a vote on everything. So they made every section of their plan subject to amendment required a vote. And subsequently, we all realized, well, that was not a good idea. Elections are expensive in a lot of parts of these plans. There's no need to have a vote. You're the elected representatives. People don't like the decisions you're making, they can vote you out of office. But you got to make that decision to go through. If you look at the sample plan, I think every section can be what I generally recommend to clients. So I'm giving direct legal advice is make them all amendable by the governing board. I think the formation authority one is the one that would be subject to voter approval, which is really nothing that's probably need to be amended. So something else you're going to consider as you go through these various sections.
That's about the public comment requirement. What is it?
Oh, the public input, the statute, the statute just says you shall solicit public input when you're forming the plan. So you're doing that in a sense right now. That's for folks watching to do the input today, but you'll have a public comment section at each meeting. People will be able to give input. Depending on how you want to structure this, and how you're going to approach the public as you move forward. A lot of entities that will actual formal public hearings. Invite the public, say we're going to talk about the RFA plan, present what our ideas are, what your input, and put it in the paper, announce it, that kind of stuff. Depending on the community you live in, either nobody shows up or a lot of people show up. So that's up to you how much public you get, but you do have to have some public input.
Public input's great. We need to involve the public. I was reading that one of the districts did a website, and they were asking public comment through the website. Is that something we could do, or that you could recommend?
You can do anything you like that. As if you think that's an effective way of getting public input. Yeah, I wouldn't say don't do it. Yes, you know your public better than I do. I know myself as a member of the public, I would probably prefer to your website, but that's just, different communities are different.
Right.
If you think there's a need for that versus just the meetings, then by all means, that would be something to do. You're not required, it's all discretionary for planning. As long as you have some form of posting.
I certainly think that we need to carve out a piece on the website for frequently asked questions, updates, blah, like one place to go to for whether there's an opportunity for input on that or not, that would be up to you all, but a place, a repository for all the information, that gets involved.
Yes.
And of course, the other reality of this is you're creating a plan the voters are gonna have to approve. They're gonna want to know what it is. There's, there are gonna be frequently asked questions, and the more you educate them in the process of developing the plan, chances are, if it's a good plan, they understand it, and you support it, hopefully they will too, if they're educated. I talked about the definition sections already, and then the formation authority, once again, it's going to be part of that depends on what you decide to do for funding, which we'll talk about. So jurisdictional boundaries, the reason this is important, kind of two reasons. First comment up there, no legal description required. Most of the early plans, they included legal descriptions because everybody thought that would be a good idea. It's not a bad idea unless you make a mistake in your legal description, which happened in a couple of the early. And so since it's not required, I don't recommend it. Your existing jurisdictions, the county knows what your boundaries are. The county will convert the RFA to those boundaries. So, just need to identify who's forming it. And then the other main part of this section is the RFA statute initially didn't have anything about boundary changes. And so we had really long sections to deal with mergers, annexations, annexation of a city into part of the RFA. That was cleaned up over the years as people started forming these and realized the issues. So now the bottom bullet point there, 5226-300. Is a clearly defined statute as to how an RFA admits additional participating jurisdictions. So you form this and then Bothell wants to join, you want Bothell to join, there's a process for that. Outside of that, you're relying on other provisions of Title 52, which aren't in Chapter 5226. So the best practice is to call those out, and you tend to be able to use those statutes as part of your authority. And statute supports that. But by having it in your plan, it makes clear, if anybody would question, hey, you can't do a partial merger a neighboring fire district because you don't have that authority. And the 5226, your plan would have given you that authority. So that's, once again, this is in terms of the RFA plan, this is more of a boilerplate section just to make sure that you're covered so that you have the flexibility to expand in the future should you choose to do so. And we get to probably the two biggest sections of the plan, the ones that can either be really easy or really hard, depending on what both jurisdictions want to do. Once again, it's always easier, I think, when it's two fire districts because speak the same language. You don't have to worry about what happens on the way it's said. You have to worry about what happens to your fire district after because you're still existing, you're still now part of an RFA. So it tends to be easier, but you have lots of options. It's the funnest thing I think about being involved in forming an RFA is you're creating a new government. People don't get to do that all the time. It's pretty good, so it's kind of neat. And the big part of that is defining how you're going to govern this new entity. The statutory requirements are that whoever's governing it has to be an elected official from a participating jurisdiction or elected by the people in the RFA. So you can't have, that Snur guy, he's pretty smart, we want him on our board. That you could create an RFA plan that had Brian Snur as a board member, because that wouldn't be an elected official. So they have to be elected. And that's, with two fire districts, each have 5-member boards right now, is that correct? Yeah. So you could say the RFA is gonna have a 10-member board, And the 2 fire districts would continue to exist until the plan changes and that all 10 members would sit on that board. When I say that out loud, the fire districts go away, there's 10 members, big 10 bosses, 5 of them. And there tends to be
Not killing the table, but a long reach.
You know, the other option, which wouldn't make as much sense, you could have, 3 appointed members from each fire district on the board, or, you're 2, so there are, Puget Sound Fire Authority for years was a 6-member board. 3 city and county members, 3 fire district, 37 members. And people, oh, you can't have an even number, because you always have tie votes. They never had a tie vote. They could have, just would have failed vote. So it's incredibly flexible, however you want to do it, whatever makes sense. Some things make more sense than others. If you have a 5-member board and you're going to appoint 3 of them to the RFA and the other 2 aren't going to be appointed, what are those 2 people going to do? There's really no fire district operating. Then people aren't going to want to serve and not be able to fill them, so it's practical considerations. The other approach is the plan creates, we're going to have the new, whatever you're going to call it, RFA. And there will be whatever number of commissioners, 5 commissioners, 7 commissioners elected at large from the entire combined population, 2 districts. That, it's a simple way to do it. They just basically you're creating what you have, just much bigger. That's something you can discuss. There are other RFAs that start with commissioners from the participating jurisdictions, and then have it staggered, so that over time they're replaced by newly elected RFA commissioners, jurisdiction 1. So that means everybody that's forming it says, okay, I'm not going to lose my job as a commissioner. I'm going to be on this RFA board, but as my term comes up, I'm going to run for election anyway. It's now going to be running for an RFA position instead of a social position. Once again, lots of options, lots of flexibility. The other bullet there, commissioner districts, just adds to your flexibility. Fire districts can create commissioner districts, neither your districts have those. It's just creating smaller geographical units within your districts where a person has to live to be eligible to run for that commissioner district position. So a lot of times the RFAs, there's a turf wars is a bad thing, but you want to protect what's yours. And there's always concern we'll get bigger, we're going to lose our local identity. So North Shore and Shoreline say, well, we want to have commissioner districts, so we always know there's somebody from the shoreline area. It's always going to be somebody from the North Shore area, as opposed to just at large, everybody can then be elected from shoreline for some reason. The North Shore commissioner districts allow you to break it up and guarantee that geographical areas are going to have districts or representation. If you do that, that just brings complication, because commissioner districts have to be based on roughly equal population. And you've got to hire a consultant that knows how to do the math there, and they do a report. So you can draw the boundaries here, and you can draw the commissioner districts you want. Then every 10 years after the census, you have to hire that person back to redraw those boundaries to make sure everything's approximately equal. If that works for you, that's great. You're both pretty highly populated districts. You probably guess you don't lack for people that are interested in running for a commissioner. One of the problems with commissioner districts is if you create a district, there's nobody in that district that wants to be on the board. You're not necessarily getting the people within the entire jurisdiction that have the most interest to do the best job. You're forcing limiting people from certain things. So but that's an option. That's something that multiple meetings you'll probably talk about how you want to do it. There is a provision that allows you to create commissioner districts based in part on the boundaries of the jurisdictions. Really wouldn't make a lot of sense for what you're forming here with 2 districts, because there's a constitutional issue with that. If you just said, well, that's easy, we'll have a shoreline district and a North Shore district. If those populations are equal, are they equal?
They're close.
They're close. If they're equal, then it works. If they're not equal, then you've got a voting rights problem, Voting Rights Act problem, because you've got 3 representatives from a large area, 3 representatives from a smaller area. So the smaller area theoretically has more.
Actually, it's not, well, it's like 57-38. I think
Which one's bigger?
the shoreline.
Okay.
So I think it's something like that.
Yeah. So
Isn't that exactly how the federal I was just gonna say.
So if you did a shoreline district and North Shore district, then shoreline would have 57,000 voters with 3 representatives. And North Shore with 38,000 voters would have their representatives. So, you know, I guess those 38.
If it's proportional, if we had 7, we'd have to cut one. Yeah, a 7-member board and it's 4 from shoreline, 2 from.
Well, I mean, commissioner districts have to be of equal population, and I think 38 and 57 is probably not one enough. So you'd have to draw the line somewhere being or make multiple districts. It works, which is why it wouldn't work for you, but let's use a Renton RFA as an example. Renton RFA, city of Renton and King County Fire District 25. City of Renton has about 100,000 people. Fire District 25 probably has 4. And they each have 3 members on the board. But it works because they're appointed by the 2 jurisdictions. So as long as you have jurisdictional boundaries and you keep board members appointed, then it works. But it works with cities and fire districts, doesn't really work with people.
Could you do it by city? Instead, could you say Shoreline gets 3 and Lake Forest Park gets 1 and Kenmore gets 2?
If they have roughly equal population.
Oh, only if they have roughly.
Or, which I'm guessing you're not gonna want to do, or if you said Shoreline gets so many, Lake Forest Park gets so many, and then you let those city councils appoint their council members.
Okay, moving on. Actually, the other question I had was, we could, because they still remain the Shoreline and North Shore Fire Departments, could each elect 3, have a 3 commissioner board and they all sit on RFA?
Do you still have volunteers?
No. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, no. Okay. I
I
forgot.
Actually, that's an interesting question because you wouldn't have any. You wouldn't be a fully career district if you formed an RFA, you wouldn't have any water district. You'd just be a fire district, and so that might actually have to think about it some more.
Okay. You can't have, because statutorily, you have to have a 3, 5, or 7 member board, correct? So you couldn't say 3 from Shoreline and 2 from North Shore Fire Department.
Well, what if we did
Well, if you
7,
had-
instead of 7, it was 4 and 3, or 5 and it was 3 and 2? Roughly keep it equal.
Oh, but you could, actually,
It's
you could,
proportional, they're not equal population, but it's proportional, like, so you've got 58,000 people represented by 4, 37,000 people represented by 3, that's roughly proportional.
well, but if the fire department still remain, you don't, correct me, you don't have to be proportional.
Right.
You can just have, you can define in the RFA that our 5-member board, we're gonna have, 3, 4, or 3, it doesn't matter. 3 from Shoreline and the other 2 will be whatever. And the North Shore board as 5, we're gonna assign 2 or 3 or whatever to the RFA board. There'd still be those other positions that would not be doing much. Backup. You could define it. And you don't have to be proportional, you don't have to have the representation be proportional. I would think that the governing board would want it to be somewhat proportional. But I think there's different ways to cut it up, as opposed to going to a commissioner district.
Yeah, you could do exactly what Chief suggested, in all likelihood, based on my experience, and I won't be around long enough to care, but those 2 districts, if you had 5-member boards, you appointed 3 and 2 or 3, however you did it. The other positions probably become vacant. Nobody would have any incentive to fill them, nobody would want to join them, so nobody actually would. Right, and it would just be, that's the practical reality, will probably happen, but that's not. Advise people to do, you just create a problem. Potential problems. But that's, as you can see, you're probably gonna have a few planning committee meetings to hash these ideas out and think about what works best. So this is really just to outline all the different options here. And this gets to the commissioner district. So this works because once again, the commissioners are appointed by, they're elected at the fire district commissioner, city council members, and then they're appointed, and there's case law in Washington State and the United States Supreme Court that says that doesn't violate the Voting Rights Act because they're appointed. It's basically the same difference. Whereas in this one, where you would have you create your own commissioner district and you base it on a city and a fire district, and then you have an at-large position. That doesn't work under current statute, it violates the Constitution. Equal right, equal, so. All right, so that's governance. Do you want to talk about that anymore before we move on to the funding part? Then you'll have plenty of time.
Just in your process of doing this a few times, what do you think ends up being the best? Just your recommendation for what runs the smoothest?
So I'm a simple person, and so I always think the simplest way to do is to create an RFA and decide how many people would adequately represent everybody in the RFA and have at-large RFA elections similar to what you do in your fire district right now, that stagger into it. So the city members with the experience start off as the RFA board, and then as elections come up, they can choose to run or not. And it's probably going to whittle down. It's probably 110-member board. So I think that is the cleanest approach. It's also the approach that is easily said by the guy that sits in an office in Des Moines and doesn't live in your communities. So, but it is the simplest. But there's, there's a lot of creativity. So then you have a section in your plan on funding. Once again, thing to remember, if you're doing a merger or something like that, then your first property tax is a blended tax, and there's all the math involved. With an RFA, you're asking the voters to approve how you're going to fund it, and you're starting from scratch. You want to start with a $1.50 tax levy and no benefit charge. That's what they'd be voting on. If you want a benefit charge, then you have a benefit charge in the dollar levy. That should be voted on. South Beach Fire Authority, which is Westport and a bunch of rural districts, dropping that in Pacific County. When they went to the voters, they asked for $1.50 in EMS levy and excess levy. And voters approved it, and they approved those levies, which have to be renewed every year. So, whatever you need financially is what you ask voters to approve. And you're all familiar with property tax levies, but you have the 3.50 levies, and then if you use the benefit charge, you don't get to use 2 of those for $1. Don't worry about the full employee. EMS levies through the slide in. It's not going to be a practical part of your plan. You would theoretically have the ability to pick up and levy whatever King County doesn't levy. No entities in King County do that, which you could, unless you have any incentive to do that.
They do it though, but through the fire benefit charge.
What he's talking about is that the King County EMS levy, which will probably be at, I don't know what they're gonna set it at, probably around 28 cents. Let's just say it's 28 cents. You could pick up the other 22 cents as long as it's the after that election. And picking up the difference so it doesn't transition beyond the 6-year.
Right, copy that, but the King County BLS allocation does not adequately cover the
Oh,
full
yes.
expense of, so what you're doing is you're supplementing that with your fire.
Yeah, I would, Brian's correct in that nobody's done it. But there's some justification for doing it. If you look at like what Snohomish County does, they're, I don't know where, I don't know what like South County is at right now, but they reestablish now and then a 50 cent per 1,000 EMS levy.
Who's that?
South Snohomish County Fire. I don't know what they're at now, so don't quote me on this, but now and then you see them reaffirming, or reestablishing the 50 cent levy. For exactly what you just said, is that it's called 28 cents, the King County EMS levy at 28 cents is not fully funded our BLS. So, you could easily justify an EMS levy. It just gets complicated because the countywide levy, we'd have to be less years, and it gets complicated. But it comes up almost every 6 years when we talk about the EMS levy getting reaffirmed of people potentially going after that missing piece.
Yeah. And that was my only point, is that it doesn't adequately fund, and so you
Yeah,
end up having fire dollars to fully fund your
correct.
system.
No, sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an option, you can talk about your documents. Right, do that, and it does increase the voter threshold to 60%, but that's not necessarily negative, because you're gonna want benefit charge as well. This is just brought in just to remind you that we consolidating jurisdictions, tax uniformity requires the taxes to be the same within the entire RFA right now, or sure, gonna have a different tax rate that shoreline. You know, get that option when you're an RFA, it's gonna be uniform everywhere. I don't know if there are, do you have hospital districts up in the center?
Mm,
Evergreen is awesome.
yeah, I know it touches part of the North Shore part. That's a good question.
So that,
Went back in the days with the pro rationing, I feel like Shoreline was, I don't think North Shore was insulated, but I know Shoreline was. So Evergreen probably touches it.
yeah, and so if you form an RFA, then everybody's then touching the RFA. If it's the benefit charge, the potential for tax rate is much reduced, because you're not taking, your third 50-cent levy is the one that's subject to proration first. You're not even levy that the benefit changes, but it is just something to keep. As you mentioned, you can also do an excess levy, as part of your plan, and those are unlimited. If you can't get enough for benefit charge or regular levy, throw an excess levy in there. The challenge, and this is one difference that both districts, you don't fund your operations through excess levies, I don't believe either one of you do.
No.
But as a fire district, you can do a maintenance and operation excess levy for 4-year periods of RFA, can only do it for 1. So that's the limit. It's constitutional authority for fire districts, school districts to do RFAs are included, so it's not going to change. But you do have that option.
One question I had, my understanding is capital bonds that, UTGOs that have been assessed, we have to, they either remain or we have to decide on consolidating them, is that correct?
Yeah, so any bonded debt, and we'll talk about this in liabilities, but.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine, so any bonded debt, it either stays with voters that approved it, if you want the other jurisdiction voters to assume their share, then it carries that 60% requirement. Every art have been involved with the bonded debt has just stayed with the original voters, because. And then the benefit charge. So here's where, you know, if you're not gonna form this till next year, this is where you go to legislature, get the law changed. You both have benefit charges, right?
Correct.
Create an RFA for a benefit charge, and you're gonna have to go back and get 60% approval, whereas if you renew your benefit charge in your districts right now, it's a simple majority. The legislature did make that change for EMS levies. There's a provision in the EMS levy statute that says that all participating jurisdictions forming an RFA have an EMS levy. Then if it's included in the RFA plan, it only requires a simple majority to continue. The voters have already given their initial approval. That language is not in the benefit charge statute. So for a benefit charge, when you include it, you're triggering 60% voter approval. Doesn't have to be validated for the benefit charge like it would for an EMS levy. Which you probably get usually following a presidential election. But it's still required 60%. And then, you know, you probably have different benefit charge formulas to get you use both use blind time.
We both use Neil, yeah,
Okay.
so,
So that shouldn't be too difficult to
no,
work. And then the other unique thing about benefit charge is there's some procedural requirements, if you remember back on you both patents, maybe nobody here was there when you first adopted it. There have to be some hearings before you initially adopt the benefit charge, but you don't exist, right? How do you have a hearing? So we include specific language in the plan that you as a planning committee will act as the de facto governing board for purposes of complying with this hearing requirements. So it's not a big deal. It's just something that if you don't do it, something like, ooh, I don't apply this statute. So that would be that. It's just kind of a summary. You can also borrow money. You're probably not going to put borrowing into your initial plan. But you could. And it is, I think key point there is it is a clean slate, so whatever you think your voters will support, whatever you need to fund the operations you want to provide, that's all going to go in the funding section. This is less of an issue also for 2 fire districts, but once again, if you ran it in the general election, you're gonna have a year before the RFA's collecting taxes, but in 2 fire districts, you both have dedicated revenues to support your districts, so your plan would provide that we'll use the combined revenues for the first year, and then we'll get our own. It's just you have to do the math, make sure you have the money. When cities are involved, it's more difficult because cities don't have a single dedicated funding source, it's just taken out of their general. So it's a bigger deal. And the other part of financial part is just assets. It's gonna start off by saying it's nice to form an RFO to fire districts because neither fire district has any incentive to retain their assets at their RFAs formed. They're paid for by the taxpayers, they're gonna be used for the taxpayers, they're gonna be owned by the taxpayers. And the fire district doesn't have a job once the RFA is formed, so why would you hang on to anything? It's very different when cities are involved, they don't give up anything unless they're forced to. In your RFA plan, you know, presumably, unless there are unique reasons, you probably transfer all the real property to the RFA, all the personal property to the RFA. Have language in the plan that all your fund balances on a specific date will be transferred over to the RFA funds. So it's pretty plain language, usually includes language that the RFA then is responsible for any expenses either fire district occurs moving forward, which could be commissioner elections, could be audit expenses as things wind down. So they just create kind of a seamless transition that works pretty well. Fire districts, it doesn't. The negotiated part of their tends not to be a big deal to fires. But could be, yeah, in situations. Liabilities is kind of the same concept there. Outside of voter approved debt, which we just mentioned. All the other debt liabilities just goes along with fire district in the RFA, and then all of the taxpayers in both within the RFA are going to pay off those debts that still exist. But you could provide otherwise. The problem with leaving debt with the fire district reforms an RFA is fire district's not going to be levying any, not going to have any revenues to pay the debt. So it just kind of forces you to a situation where everybody pays off those debts. And same for left liabilities and pension liabilities. So there's no fire district left to pay those. No fire district revenues left to pay those. Whereas if it's a city, once again, the plan usually provides that the city remains responsible for its level one liabilities. So it's all incurred prior to the formation. This and that's just more of the work on all of that, signing things over. There's a lot of work for the RFA on the backside. Staff so we got your boundaries set, we get your governance board set, you know, how you're gonna fund it, and then you have a section about how it's going to be run. Once again, this is one of the more can be one of the more challenging sections of the plan to come up with. It's really one that's gonna be driven by your operations staff and your chiefs. How is this going to work? Who's gonna be the chief? What's the chain of command gonna look like?
Pretty simple.
That's because you made cookies.
That's why I brought cookies.
And then just, you know, most RFA plans have an organizational chart either attached to them or referenced in about how it's gonna be run as you bring 2 entities together. I'm not sure how consolidated your operations are right now.
We're pretty, I mean, it's, we have the board of commissioners and Amy is a part-time board secretary. All other employees have come over to Shoreline and they're all one union, one, I mean, we're almost there already.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, makes forming your RFA a lot easier, makes your meetings a lot easier moving forward. Argue with each other about governance. Not hard to discuss. Yeah, you've got the one local and they're all employed by Shoreline, so that's just. You know, on whatever day we become effective, they're no longer Shoreline employees and now RFA employees. And you've got collective bargaining agreements in place to really, you have to negotiate the impacts of forming an RFA, but those aren't gonna be very significant. I would think, since they're already all on the same level. Whatever. There are, in the front end here, there are statutory protections for employees in the formation of an RFA. And they're really, they're safety nets that were put into the statute out of labor concerns when the statute was adopted, but I haven't seen an RFA where it's ever talked about statutory protections from this, the RFAs and fire districts are treating employees well in the process. And then civil service, so you're just gonna say no. You don't have civil service, there would be no logical reason to create it at this point. And then, kind of the final section, we're talking about what services you're gonna provide. You provide the same services you're providing now. You know, I think the bigger one here is the code inspections, fire investigations, which you, an RFA has authority to provide. But the responsibility of that will still reside with cities within the RFA, the county, your unincorporated areas, so. Is a plan, if you're providing those services, you're gonna have contracts with Shoreline, Lake Forest Parker, whomever, those are the types of things you can call out in the section of the plan. Once again, as part of the plan, it's gonna be driven by the chief and staff as to what services you're gonna be providing. And you keep it pretty general so that you.
We already have those contracts. I would think that'd be pretty simple to.
This section tends to be a bigger deal once again when you're working with. City informing part of the RFA. So I tell my clients, you need to charge the city, and the city will say, we're not gonna pay them. So once again, I think this would be the last potential issue. That is, do you do any ambulance transfer service?
We do. So the second bullet kind of is interesting. So we not only transport BLS, well, ALS too, but we don't charge for that. We charge for BLS transports and with GEMT in both districts. Part of that is because there hasn't been adequate ambulance services. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we got into it back in the day. But if all of a sudden there was, what is, I don't know, is that's kind of subjective, I suppose. What is adequate private ambulance service? 4-minute response and
Adequate private, yeah, so there's a, I don't have this one memorized, so I'm gonna go through it, or just read about it. There's a statutory process, you go through notice.
Okay.
Put out notice that the current ambulance company is not adequate, you would define what you mean by adequate. And then they have opportunity to object.
Okay, this hasn't been an issue though for you?
No, and if you don't have. Strong private ambulance service operating out here competing with it won't be an issue for you, but the centers.
Okay.
We're the provider, we've been the provider for transfer that over.
We can't make the argument that. Our ambulance transfers are superior level of service and it's a better service to the community, and so we're gonna continue to like that.
I mean, those are the kind of arguments you would use, yes, in if you were dealing with us, one of the statute here, so I worked on this morning for another client. So the statute says the plan may authorize the authority to establish a system of ambulance service to be operated by the authority. Blah, blah, blah. However, the authority shall not provide for the establishment of an ambulance service that would compete with any existing private ambulance service. Comma. Unless they determine that the existing private ambulance service is inadequate. So we would stop, I presume, we would in the plan say, we're establishing an ambulance service because current ambulance service is provided by the 2 fire districts, and there is no private ambulance that is operating.
Okay.
Systemic, I'm not sure. The private ambulances and.
We do pick up, you know, probably in the neighborhood about 100 transports a month. From a private ambulance, you know, like AMR or something like that, but it's not nearly what we would need.
So I think that would be the position, like would take, we might need to discuss that a bit more. You don't have contracts with any private ambulance.
Not now, we're actually, the zone is about to go out to an RFP though. To get, it's not for primary care though, it's just for backup, for all the organizations except for Bubby. Bubby's got their own contract with TriMet. So we've been with AMR as a zone. But they wanted to renegotiate, and so we're about to go out for an RFP. Could be TriMet, it could be AMR, it could be ABC ambulance, but really, there's only two that can even come close to providing, adequate services. And again, I don't think it's adequate for what we're talking about, but AMR and TriMet would even be probably they would have to really up staff and get more apparatus on the road.
I doubt TriMet would try to take off the fire service. AMR.
Yeah. Well, Falk would, but they've left the area, so.
So that is something that, whoever is working with planning committee as legal counsel probably needs to be looked at fairly carefully. It could be a situation where, well, let's just go through the process, so there's no question, because nobody's gonna be able to dispute the fact that it's not adequate, then that might make sense, but there's timeframes in there, so it's something people want to do. That's finalized. Okay. And I guess the last consideration, which you don't really deal with as a planning committee, but questions always come up. What happens if we get married and we don't like it? There is a process for withdrawing from our vetting. It would be horrible to go through. Even worse than a divorce. Because you're one huge entity thing and divide yourselves up. It hasn't happened. I've never heard it being discussed happening. That's usually a question the cities ask when they form present fire service to a certain extent. But there is a process. Arguably, there's questions whether you need to do it. And there's a small, if you had one corner of former North Shore and Evergreen Hospital District, that's going to cause proration. It's a process where you can withdraw them from the district, levy your taxes, and bring it back in. Okay. That's rather unique. So that's the end of the prepared stuff. Yeah, so questions, comments, other. Okay. Simple. Oh, it's just simple.
What are the main pitfalls? What are the big hangups and what can we do in advance to help prepare for those?
So RFAs tend to fail in this stage when there are multiple entities involved, or as opposed to two. It's not, if there are a number of multiple entity RFAs that perform, but a lot more have failed in the planning process, because getting 3 people on the same page is harder than getting 2 people on the same page. So you don't have that issue. Governance is usually the big stumbling block. If the boards have strong territorial feelings and want to maintain representation in certain areas, it just makes the plan more complicated. But that's an area where people tend to stumble. Finance is usually costs what it would cost in the fire department, so that's usually not a big issue. Support of the local is huge, because you need voters to approve it. You as fire district cannot use your funds to promote it, even though you're asking voters to approve it, because you think it's a good idea. Local can put all the effort they want.
Does anybody need to see any of these slides again? Because I'm gonna stop sharing that.
Will they be made just to?
What's that?
Will they be made available to us to go back?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I can send it out to you.
I took all my contact notes out of it. And then, yeah, so I mean, local support, in fact, Puget Sound RFA, it was approved by 75% of the voters, and that was all, not all, but the large part of the local out there. Very legal development, explain why it was a good idea. So they're the biggest supporter, and if they oppose it, it's gonna be much harder to pass. If they support it. But I think, as we saw going through this, so many portions of your plan are almost gonna write themselves, because you're already working together. I think there's a lot of, both have benefit charges, so there's no unknowns about that. You've got one local, you've got one chief, so I'm told. So I think you're set up for success if the two districts believe it will generate the service levels you want here in your communities. So you've taken a lot of the interim steps that lead up to a full consolidation. It's usually what's recommended. Big, small consolidation steps work up to a full consolidation. Seems like you're kind of at that point. I'll say just open up questions, but on the legal representation point, so I'm of counsel to that tax insurance CSD law, which creates issues for us as lawyers. When I represent RFAs, I usually will take the role as legal counsel to the planning. I represent Shoreline in various matters too. That represents North Shore on a lot of matters. So what I would normally do is I would put together, if the boards are interested in having one attorney kind of drive with us, we put together a joint representation letter that says, if you hire me or if you hire Matt, both districts hired to represent the planning committee moving forward, or just represent both districts. Explain what you start fighting with each other and I draw, can't represent either side. And so there's a whole letter that explains the pros and cons of it. That's, if the boards are interested in that approach, that's what we do. Really a joint representation letter at this point would really be with Matt and Brian, because we're associated with the same firm. So you would get the benefit of both attorneys, whether I took the lead, whether Matt took the lead. If Shoreline, no, we want someone looking out for our interests, no, we want someone looking out for our interests. Then there's still a little conflict, Matt and I, because Matt talked to the North Shore board, that's pretty easily dealt with, I think, we can maintain separate offices. But then you would hire another attorney to guide you through the RFA process. So you have those options. And that's something each board is discussed. But if there's interest in joint representation, I would talk to Matt a bit about it. Send out a letter. You can consider.
So is it just you just need to write a letter, or Matt needs to write a letter, and you need to write a letter?
We probably joined the right letter. I haven't done this with him yet, because we've only been associated since January.
Right.
I haven't come up with it. But I mean, I have a standard letter. They probably have a stance letter. We probably take the best parts of both and send it out. It would be retained. Okay.
But I think as far as these meetings go, we should have a leading representative at our meetings. Because this, everything's legal.
Well, as I was saying earlier, I would really like Brian to walk us through this whole thing. I think this really only becomes an issue if both the boards are now fighting from a legal standpoint. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
If
if you were
not discussions in a or debate or whatever in these meetings, but if we were getting to a legal battle of some sort.
That would make the changes.
The key is, if it's a joint representation, then there's no attorney-client privilege between myself and Shoreline or myself and North Shore. It's with both entities. So if you call me and say, dang, Shoreline people, I need some advice, how do we do that? I can tell you, but I'm gonna tell them what I told you, right? That's where it falls apart.
Yeah.
If you don't see that as an issue, then joint. And usually, when you're building something, joint representation tends to work good. This was your first meeting about ever working together. I'd be a lot more hesitant, but you're already working together, so the chance.
We can't be transparent with each other, then we shouldn't be going forward. Sorry, just my opinion.
So we're not, this is not an adversarial relationship.
Right.
We're all trying to row in the same damn direction.
Yes. And that's why I think joint representation works in
Yeah.
that situation, but that's your. Well, I can explain the pros and cons, and you get to decide whether that makes sense.
That requires, majority vote of each.
Yeah, each board would authorize. This, you know. Are you chief for both districts?
Yeah.
Each board would authorize.
Yeah.
On the other half.
All the firefighters are the same.
Each board could approve it, have the chair sign it.
I don't know, the North Shore Board took, Matt presented this and you took, it wasn't a letter, but you all agreed that this was not an issue. I don't know if that is probably not enough, you probably have to write a letter.
Yeah, I think, and Matt had emailed me a while back, just kind of sharing it, I can't remember exactly what he said at the top of my head, but. I think we need to take one more step to form it. Now, this was intended to be the educational part, and if the boards want to move forward, get to that or. I like this kind of stuff. I deal with other kind of. What was that? So we work together.
So what's our next steps today?
So you have the option of appointing a board chair or planning committee chair if you want to do that. That's really the only thing the statute speaks to today, and then setting your schedule. So setting up your schedule.
Okay,
And I can throw it out and kind of decide this, just how you're gonna structure your meetings, but. The entities where I've actually been involved in the process along the way, they tend to have, planning committee meetings to discuss the needs statement, and you just kind of work through those sections of the plan. Focus on one and maybe put the hard ones up front, and maybe put the back, those
You repeat that, you put what in the front? What in the back?
Part of the, I don't know if there are any difficult issues discussed here. I suppose governance, governance is probably the one that had the most discussions. Maybe deal with that first. If everybody says, oh, let's just work. You're not wasting time trying to plan and failing the governance. And the other sections, just from what I've heard here today, sound like they, require discussion, public input, all that kind of stuff. They don't sound like wrote out. I think the governance process wrote like, you have all these tools, it's just going to do it. I'm sure we get you on the honest ballot. Miss that to get you to that.
I think we were leaning towards well, I guess if you go February, but we were leaning towards the April measure.
So I think you've got plenty of time, and then there's so much work on the backside that you need that kind of time, just to be great to do that. Right? You had monthly meetings with down. Next February, that's submitted to funding.
Yeah, big February, yeah. 7, 8 months, yeah.
so we need to move into looking at a chair. Next.
If you, I think it'd be nice to have a point of contact for me to try and help, schedule these things. But I think the biggest hurdle I had was just getting this first meeting. In the future, if we could set like, if it is monthly meetings or whatever, setting a date now, or maybe the next 3 or what, or the same date on each month or.
I think having it consistent, like our commission meetings will lend.
Well, and then that's the
Easier to follow.
The interesting thing too is that if we want. I guess it depends too on what the boards would like to see as far as the public input, because. I don't know what your schedules are. I know the two of you guys are, well, actually, you're on days now, so. The 24-hour, you're locked for 24, so a meeting during the day, the work day might be easier for you, not so much for you anymore. But at the same time, if we're looking for public input, if we're gonna have special open houses or public hearings or whatever I would suggest in the evening to try and make sure that everybody can attend. But actually, and we can flip-flop or, however you guys want to do it,
That's probably what we should do. Is
or at least, I know that, Josh, you were typically okay at 4.
Yeah,
If you have plenty of notice.
yeah, 5's better, but 4's, I can do 4 or 5.
I also thought it might be good to flip-flop between 61 and 51.
Yes.
To make sure that everybody has, an opportunity to make it more convenient for local, interest. And then also to take some of the load off Amy, unless she wants to do both meetings, that, Beatrice wasn't available for tonight, but, wherever it was at would be to, for assistance and support and getting the meetings going. So, I guess the first question is, do you want to elect the officers?
Do we need one? Does anybody feel like we need one, the chair?
I think the chair makes it easier for the chief for buying it.
Okay.
Good point.
The biggest advantage for a chair would be if something pops up that I need, hey, this means not gonna work, are you okay with me trying to reschedule it, or something that, I can't even imagine anything that would come up with an acute need or something, but because right now I'm emailing all of you, and getting input is sometimes challenging.
I'd be happy to do chair. Somebody else wants it, they can have it too, though.
That works for me. You're here on this side, so. can the chief-
I have a hard time working with her though, so.
Just say.
I nominate,
More cookies.
I nominate Councilmember Fisher as chair of the planning committee.
I'll second it. Finally got a second something.
I'm at the doghouse now.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor?
Is there any rules that we have to follow?
No, as long as you vote in favor of it, you have a chance to speak up.
I vote for it.
Okay, well, seeing no discussion, we'll call the question and we'll have a vote. All in favor of Councilmember Fisher being our chair?
Aye.
And aye. All right, it's unanimous.
Thank you. Just to make it more complicated, you want to have a vice in case she's not available? No? Okay.
So we're only going to do a couple meetings.
Hmm?
That would look ahead and pick a couple. So you want to try and stay with Mondays, Tuesdays, or what?
I'm kind of with Josh on this. With enough notice, I could probably get it on almost anything except for the first Tuesday of each month and the first and third Thursdays of each month. And now I think Bothel's meetings are also on Tuesdays too. So Mondays or Wednesdays?
Send your deputy chief.
We've got King County meetings too.
Oh, Wednesdays. Yeah, Wednesdays are first and third Wednesday.
Wednesdays,
Wednesdays or
And you can serve.
Third Monday work?
The King County
Wednesdays.
meetings too.
Third Wednesday of the
First and second Wednesdays are county meetings.
Right, so what about taking like
Mondays.
Mondays on the third Monday of the month?
For me, Monday is the best. If you're gonna make a meeting, that's my best,
Like the third
my
Monday of the
best
month
day.
would be that would be the
It's
20th.
gonna be evenings.
Well, that would be 2 weeks out. Do we want to meet in 2 weeks or just skip out? But like, so what day? I'm looking at the third Monday, which works for me for the next 5 months.
The 20th,
The 20th?
May 17th, June.
I'm coming home from Wenatchee that day. I should be home in time for like 4 or 5 o'clock meeting.
Do we want to, and stay with 4 o'clock or do we want to do 5?
I can do either one.
What works best?
I'm fine either way. Mondays are good for the most part, so.
Let's, 5's work better for.
All right.
5 p.m.
5 o'clock.
That work?
And Josh is gonna bring dinner?
It just says. when the game started, but That's just part of the deal, so.
So, sorry, Commissioner Webster, can you repeat that? So the next meeting will be Monday at 5 p.m. on what day?
Did we want to go in 2 weeks or do we want to jump it to 6 weeks out?
We didn't get any work done today, really. Thank you. No, no. So maybe the 20th would be good.
20th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're talking about the third Monday of each month, is that really it?
Oh, you wanna set it that way?
Yeah.
Third Monday.
I can,
Yeah,
if you guys are okay with that, I can send out invites for you all.
that'd be good.
I'll just pick the third Monday of each month. Next one would be at 51.
Oh, yeah.
That should be alternate
Alternative.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes it
So
better.
it'll be a 51. And then June will be at 61.
At 51, this is
Okay.
next time.
Yeah.
Amy has a conflict, for the next one. Can we do here again, on the 20th and then start flipping?
All right, we can do that. All right, so 20th.
I'm not available in June. I can.
Sorry, we-
But I'm not. 50.
Okay.
So I guess wherever you pulled it. be interesting.
I say you can Beatrice up to speed on 51 systems. Then
So we're gonna,
let's go here again on the 20th, and then I'll get Beatrice up to speed on the 51. You know, so that you guys can flip flop.
5 P.M.
So it's gonna be here. on the
Here, yeah, here in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to 51 in
And
June.
on the 17th.
then we're gonna look at the 17th. Okay, I'm like you.
15th of July, we'll be back here, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Unless you guys want to schedule anything else out.
We'll do it July 17th,
Yeah,
I'll send out invites.
15th,
June 17th, I mean.
yes. At 51.
And then it's July 15th, August
It's
9th.
5 o'clock.
Have a,
August 19th.
at,
Will the boards be meeting before the 20th to address legal counsel?
Ooh,
51.
Northford meets tomorrow.
we meet, North Shore meets tomorrow night, but
We meet on.
Shoreline doesn't meet again, it's what is
We
it?
meet on 16th.
Oh, yeah, actually. That's right,
Well, we'll work up
okay,
So
a joint
so it's good timing then.
I'll send it to you.
June 17th could be at 51.
And Matt attends the North Shore meeting,
Yes.
so he can
Yes.
present it.
June 17th, 51.
Okay. Yeah, that was
July 15th, 61.
July, I haven't got the July yet.
To be here.
We'll send it out.
I'll send out invites to you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that,
That's good.
Wants
So
to get it this
so the
fall.
next two meetings will be 61 and then.
yeah, July 22nd. yeah.
Well, we'll do the next one here, and then we'll try and get the 51 on in
Okay,
in
I'll just
June.
kind of leave it open.
Yeah. And I'll try and get Beatrice up to speed on managing 51, or I will.
And July 15th is.
And if it's a problem, chief, I imagine that we'll be able to do a few over in North Shore, so if we needed to make an extra one here, because Amy's not gonna be there, I don't think. It would be that big of a deal.
Well, I just want to be respectful of both all of you guys, but also for people that if they want to attend,
Yeah,
so.
but I mean, if we're doing one a month, the next, 12 months.
Either way, it's hard time of day to get here, it's a hard time of day to get. the 51.
Exactly, exactly. It is what it is. And we need to work around Beatrice and Amy's schedules.
Yeah. So, you know, it's, oh, go ahead.
Just
So July 15th is gonna be over here.
July, yeah, we're.
No, it's here.
Well,
July-
July-
July will be there.
Let's
Oh,
leave that
July will
open.
be there.
Leave it open.
July.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having a meeting that day.
I got the time in on the place, we'll get later.
Right?
That's enough for now.
All right.
Amy has a
I
question.
had a question about the minutes. So, these minutes are for the RFA planning committee, so they're will be approved at and signed at the next RFA planning committee by the 6 members here. And then posted to kind of both departments minutes.
Well,
Yeah, if you're,
do you want to make an RFA,
I
study
need-
on the
I'm gonna work on
website,
it.
and then we can just put the meeting minutes, everything in their agenda.
meeting notice.
Almost, it's another, can you do a whole nother, like you have North Shore and Shoreline, and then do an RFA
You mean on the website?
on the website, so that. they can-
Actually, I was planning, just like I have the lid lift button, if you saw it, in the website, I was gonna do another one for RFA. And go to another page, and we can have all the stuff there. I'd like one place to go, so that we don't have stuff.
Yeah, it'd be good, and then we could just direct.
Floated.
Like it, sounds good.
I know the designer of the website, I'm getting on
Jennifer's been really
it. Has she been working on it?
Yeah, she's been awesome. So, is that, you good?
So,
If, with your permission, I'd like to start working on the background and needs statements, because that's something that I could probably work on. for y'all, and then you guys can start focusing on the governance and so forth.
We'll do some research.
Do we want to come with some ideas to the next meeting on governance?
You know, the big question we haven't asked, are you available on these days?
You know, you made my. I don't have meetings on Mondays generally. I'm really missing the fact that I can't script one more evening of my life with the meetings. So I was on the third Monday of the month, I have an HOA meeting that I hate going to, and now I'm gonna excuse.
Oh, you gotta get.
I totally understand.
So it's not taking up another night, it's just replacing something I'd rather do less.
When you get paid.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
One other thing that I would throw out there is, you know, for, again, ideas not only on the governance, but how do we want to engage with the public? You know, and or, you know, inviting, and getting the word out to invite and for public comments, it's one thing, but we're here to get work done too. But we may want a more open, robust conversation and it's more of that open house kind of feel. I don't know if it's worth it until we have some stuff defined, because right now we don't have anything defined, but at some point, 2-3 meetings, whatever it is down the road. I think it'd be really good to engage, and the cities are gonna be,
We're gonna want
obviously
the cities.
interested as well.
We can do that next meeting.
Well, I would wait until after this next meeting because, we don't have anything to share, but maybe at this next meeting, we'll have something after that to share. Depending on how things go. That would be my suggestion at least.
My concern is, if we meet one meeting, one Monday a month, are we gonna be able to get everything accomplished in time for October first?
I don't see that as a problem because most of the stuff most of the challenges or hurdles that we've got to encounter have already been taken care of.
Already done.
That's good.
The biggest
We're so
issue,
prepared for this, it's ridiculous.
the biggest issue that I see is the governance thing.
No.
I don't know, you guys can probably get that knocked out next meeting. I don't know, I'm being naive, but because I've never done this, but a lot of the stuff that I looked through the plan thing and I've talked to other people that have gone through this and we're 90% there. 91.4% there. You just put a general number on. So I don't know. I mean, I would think certainly we have about 7 or 8 months, before it has to be on, before I have to send anything to the county.
Yes.
So we gotta get through all this and then take it back to each governing board, to approve, but I don't see any reason why this can't be done.
That's good. Just thought I had, so.
Steve, what was our first deadline?
The first deadline would be 90 days back from, if we were going for April, be 90, April, whatever it is, 90 days back. And what's that? February, it's gonna be in February sometime. So February, so that's
11 months.
7 months from now. Did I do that right? May, June, July, 8 months.
Good.
So 8 months should be plenty of time. Okay. Unless we run into some real hurdles, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle is I will want to get time for public input. Other than that, I think the stuff that we have to do is probably only a few meetings, I think, maybe 5 at the most.
So I was gonna say, do you have a copy of a RFA that somebody else, that's similar to what ours is gonna be that we could look at?
Yeah, I can send that a couple of sentences.
That would help with both of the government.
I sent this to you, guys, a couple months ago. I can resend it if you'd like, and I can send the PowerPoint presentations.
But I want to see.
No, I know. In addition to what you just asked.
Are you guys interested in looking at a completed RFA? You've got
We
one.
just had a copy of something and I asked her for it, so she.
So, yeah, so you.
I haven't looked at that, but
George Mason RFA is probably the most interesting, the way they did their governance, it's that staggered approach. And I think we just did that.
So we could either send it to our board secretary or who's.
send it to me and I'll help distribute it. So, one of the things that, just FYI, and again, I'm not assuming anything for any of the electeds here, but if we form this RFA, there's going to be at least one person that will have a direct conflict of interest. And so, our 10 could probably pare down pretty, kind of quickly, even from just a needed attrition standpoint. It's just something that, because I think that staggered approach might be, I'm interested in seeing how that is. But one of the things that's been important has been making sure that we have representation from geographically, if we can maintain it, which over time, if we go to the whole RFA, may or may not continue. So something to think about, I suppose.
That's, I mean, once you've got time, if you want to explore commissioner districts, I don't know how much those consultants cost, but it's not.
I prefer to stay away from commissioner districts, but if we had to, if we maintained the fire districts and pulled representation from the fire districts, maybe that's a way to go. That's something for you guys to consider. Over time, if we go to a whole RFA and it's at large, are you guys okay with that? If not, then are we gonna go to the fire districts, and establish those and pull from those electeds? That's you guys. Or are we gonna go, we could do the commissioner districts, but I'd really like to stay away from, that's like planning.
That's the way.
I know we're looking at just the two districts right now, but if we are looking at going north end more, we need to look at governance.
Right.
That's expandable.
Well,
Expandable,
right.
so doing a district, we gotta really look at this, because that is the stumbling block.
That's a really good point. It's something for us to be thinking about. What's that?
We want to be able to grow.
Right,
We
is,
need to-
there's the potential that BOC will be looking at this, maybe even next year, who knows? What does that look like with a city that's actually a city and a fire district that Snow 10? They would have to also agree, to come in, and what would that, so we need to set up the governance to be able to accept, like you just said, a new partner, and what does that representation look like?
So there's an interesting part, that's what we need your help.
Yeah, and if another jurisdiction comes in, whether it's Bothell and District 10, or however you do it, you have to amend the plan. And you deal with it at that point, but yeah, looking forward. So Puget Sound Fire now has 9 voting members and like 6 non-voting advisory members from the various jurisdictions that serve.
How does the east side?
East Side is a nonprofit.
Yeah,
So they have,
Yeah, 27 members.
But they only have.
but they're not all on the voting.
No,
you know.
it's lots of small, yeah.
The actual core of East Side is like, I want to say it's 5, I think it's 5 entities.
Yeah.
And they all have voting members, but then there's contract agencies. They're not, I don't know what the
They don't
term
get
is.
voted less.
There's partnering agencies, and then there's like contract agencies. And the contract agencies don't have a vote as the governing board, but the partnering agencies do. And so like, I think like Mercer Island, Duval, and Woodinville,
Well,
all they're in East Side, but they don't have a vote on the operation of the, if that's back to the 5. But even of those 5, there's like 17, there's like 7, out of the 5, there's like 17
one, two.
vote elections or something. It's something crazy.
Yeah.
I talked to the previous chief about it one time, and he's like, all I deal with is, answering stuff from the electeds. And with 17 people, I can imagine that would be challenging if everybody's asking for stuff. So anyway, sorry.
We're
I digress.
unique, it's very fitting for that district. There's not another thing like it anywhere.
So it is pretty unique, and it's pretty kind of cool in that sense. There's some cool things about their governance, but there's some really
It's definitely
wacky things.
follows the typical, what Eastside did is what they do in California.
Oh, really? Is that what they
They
do?
took that governance model.
Okay. Well, it is unique to this area. If there isn't anything else like it. Anyway,
That it?
if there's nothing else for me.
Amy's got her hand up. What do you got?
She has a question.
So I just was gonna recap what's next. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, so the next meeting will be Monday, May 20th at 5 p.m. here at Station 61. The chief will begin drafting the background and needs statements so that prior to that May 20th meeting. Is there other items that you want to put on that agenda?
I would think the big pitfalls of the governance, I would say, let's start having a conversation about what you guys want to have.
I agree.
I would also include a general discussion of RFA plan, just so you can go.
So we can go wherever we
Then
want.
you can have an actual practical agenda to keep these people in mind.
So the official agenda will be a general discussion.
Yeah, and then you can break it down for items that, you know.
Because we get, can add items to it.
Is it,
And just if I could make a suggestion, it might be helpful to create a timeline. So if April is the ballot date, like what sort of milestones you want to hit before February?
I can come up with a timeline for you. Name.
I was curious.
Okay, so. If we think that Bothell is on the horizon. Can we wait and then do the name, or is it important to get the name? Now,
Oh, your name has to be on the plan.
Yeah.
So you can't wait. I mean, you can pick.
alright, I just don't, if they are, again, it's a what, it's an if, I mean, you're talking about. Steps here, yeah, okay, we'll talk about it, I guess.
Just keep in mind, you already have a North County RFA, you already have North Country
So
EMS district, and so
Oh,
that name's kind of used.
the funny one that was thrown out was,
North Lake RFA.
well, there is North Lake.
North
The
Shore.
one
Shore.
North Shore. It could be North Lake. The one that was thrown out, because we talked about this a bit in, the shoreline side, about when we contracted with North Shore. The fire department of North King County. To reverse, to do a New York twist on it. No, it's like, all right,
Nope.
I'm not.
That's the NKC.
So, yes, actually, it's like, okay.
Right?
So it's just something to think about, whether we,
That's awesome.
if and or when we're going to change our name to make sure that we're, trying to capture if Bothell is coming on, or wait until Bothell comes on, or engage with Bothell. At some level, I don't know. We do have time before this actually goes to the ballot. We can have a placekeeper name in there, for a while, so. Anyway, it's just something to think about.
Just North County. I mean, is there?
There's already.
There are those guys.
Well, there's a South County too.
South County.
But there's a South King County and there's a South Snohomish County, so
So why not a North? King?
it's yours, it's South Snohomish.
North King Fire.
What's that?
North King Fire Authority.
We could be North King,
Yeah.
I mean, not just North, but like North King County.
Whatever we do, we gotta make sure that it happens before Redmond makes their choice. They're gonna probably having some similar.
Yeah,
Are they doing all right?
Do you know who's guiding that process?
are they doing an RFA?
Are they doing it?
Yeah, with their fire district. The
Oh, with their
Redmond
fire district, yeah, okay, not with Bellevue or Kirkland, right?
Not yet.
Yeah,
City.
okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, it would not surprise me if they don't become northeast King County Fire Department, because the medic program is
So
just,
that, we should probably put that as one of the items in the name, because that's when we keep it on the agenda.
Yeah. Their medic program is already rebranded to Northeast King County Medic One. So,
Can't have North King County and Northeast King County.
North King County.
North Shore. See, the problem is that we talk about King County, North Shore or North Lake would still potentially could be beyond the King County border, but if we, if we were looking at Bothell, if we say something that has King County in it, then it kind of alienates half of Bothell.
Yeah, so North Lake. I thought that would be good.
Just go for the government fire source Washington RFA, and then you
Well,
will.
okay. I was laughing pretty hard about Puget Sound fire. I was like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, are you gonna take over all of Puget Sound?
And they got away with it, though.
Yeah, well.
They developed that through a internal process through all their crews.
Really?
Yeah, it was a very drawn out, lengthy process of nominations. People still think step.
Well, you may recall all the way back down to District 40 with Renton. District 40 and Maple Valley were gonna get together at one point, and you know what killed it? The color of fire engines.
Or they wanted yellow.
We were, Maple Valley was red. 40 was that, a yellow, or actually it was kind of a green, it's kind of like the Duval green. And we'd already done everything else, it was like, that's what's gonna kill us. So you laugh, I mean, the name can be really poignant, it's like changing the color of a fire engine, everybody's got an opinion about it. And whatever it is theirs is right.
The West Sound RFA that we're trying to form over Bremerton.
I've got to take off.
Okay,
I've got grandchildren.
I think we're good.
Maybe our chair.
I was gonna say-
Lake to Sound are.
It's
You are not
5:45,
sure.
motion
No, he's
adjourned.
doing a great job, I love it. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Keeping us on track too.
And it's
North
like
Lake
that,
might work.
Just say.
We're short could work. I think
Yeah, but it worked. We were north.
you guys